Hello friends and welcome back. I'm Nick. This is MSFS Flight Plans and I sure am glad you're coming along for the ride because I'm not entirely sure that I can save the entire world through simming if I have to do it all by myself. So all you guys probably know by now that I have really got a thing for remote locations. In fact, the more remote the better in my book. Well, I have found a real gem for us today, guys, way up in the northern part of the province of Manitoba, Canada, which is on the western shores of Hudson Bay, way on the western shores. We're going to check out the town of Churchill, which you can see on the side of that hangar right over there. And I am delighted to tell you it not only looks pretty dang good for something this far north, but is also super interesting, which I did not realize until I started researching this place. And not only that, but it's going to give us a great excuse to play around in the newest addition to my hangar, which is the Super Decathalon by Hangar Studios, who is the same dev that brought us all those Navions. And I haven't flown those in a while, but all of them were fantastic planes. I enjoyed them a lot. The exterior, interior detailing, as you can see, looks fantastic. And startup is pretty simple, so let's go ahead and get that going. So first I need to look up over my shoulder here where all the switches are. Battery, ignition, full mix, full prop, a little bit of throttle, and we'll turn the fuel on for just a second, and then turn it off, and then crank her up. Just like that, nice and easy. We'll get that guy set before I forget about it, and let's turn our avionics on. There we go. Okay, so while that's warming up for just a second, let's take a quick look at the Google Maps so you can see just how remote this actually is. So here's Manitoba up here, and I was just kind of looking around for little tiny dots on the world map that would indicate a really, really remote airport, and I showed it to you guys last time if you saw the end of our last video. Way, way, way up here, and this is about the only airport anywhere in this vicinity. It's going to be right up here. There's the airport. So we're going to take off. It's probably a 26-mile flight altogether. This thing's not really fast, so it'll be kind of short, and there's not a whole lot to see outside of this area, so it'll be fine at 26 miles. We're going to take up from here, come up around the airport like this just to get some altitude, and then fly back over the center of the runway. We're going to have two runways, a big asphalt one here and a gravel one over on this side, which is the one we're going to use. Come around the town of Churchill over here, and there's not a real fort for us to look at. This is an old air base that we're taking off from, but not really much to see other than the airport. And then we're going to come across Churchill, and we do have a real fort right up here, the Prince of Wales Fort, so we'll go check that thing out. Come back around the southern side of town, cruise down here to check out a few sites right along the Churchill River, and then come out here. Look at this landscape. Look at all these lakes. So we'll come out here and check that out, and we've got a few spots over here that I located on the map that are pretty interesting. So we'll just swing around those, come back up this way, and then come right back in at the place that we left from. And I think the whole thing will probably be about 20 or 30 minutes in the air. Not too bad at all. Okay, so let's get this guy going. We will be taking this on autopilot, and I'm going to start because the first landmark that we're going to try to find is pretty small, and if we can't see it from the air, I'll come back around and try to spot it in the drone once we land. So I'm just going to start at 1,000 feet for cruising, and then we'll get up to about 2,000 feet after we fly back over the airport after we buzz it. And even though this isn't a huge airport, it's kind of complicated from the taxiway, so I'm going to have to look over to my left to see where the heck we're going. Parking brake off. And let's go ahead and give it a little throttle. So I'm going to turn right around, just do a little U-turn here. This is not the live weather. Being this late in the season, it does not get very bright up here, so I moved it back to July for fear that things would just be a little bit too dim looking. Okay, so we got to come around the side of this. The only add-ons that we have is this airport, but it also brings in a lot of landmarks around here, which aren't huge landmarks, but if you don't throw that in, which is freeware by the way, of course that will be linked in the video description, probably wouldn't be worth flying up here other than the interesting natural landscape because it will add a lot of the stuff that we're going to be checking out from the air. So that will be in there, and that's the only thing that we've got. And even though this airport's all modded up, not really a big performance hit, which of course is always great. It's kind of hard to see over the top of that, isn't it? So this is Churchill Airport. It was built by the U.S. Air Force during World War II. And still gets an astonishingly high volume of traffic considering the location way up here, but that's mostly for tourists and scientists, eco-tourists, visiting for reasons that you'll completely understand by the time we're done. I'll show you some of the things that are coming up here to see. But they've got two runways, as I mentioned before. One of them is this 4,000-foot gravel runway that we'll hit here in just a second. And the other one is a massive 9,000-footer that's maintained, I'm sure, of course, for the people flying in here on jets. But it's also used as an emergency strip for large jets if they need to ditch somewhere, or not ditch, but I guess make an emergency landing somewhere. And they said it's big enough to handle a 747 if they need to come in here, which is nice because there certainly aren't many other places to come down. So this is the gravel one here, and you know, if this was 2024, you can almost see it as a little bit textured. I'm sure we'd be bucking all over the place. But 4,000 feet long, that's long for a undeveloped runway. I can't think of another one that wasn't paved that was 4,000 feet, even anywhere close to it, so that's pretty long. And I'm kind of wondering why they keep a gravel runway that long, because what kind of plane that would land on a gravel runway needs 4,000 feet? But we're going to use it. Okay, I'm not going to go all the way down to the end because we definitely don't need that much. This plane doesn't have flaps either. So when we're coming in, our approach speed is going to be 80 knots, which is also fairly brisk for a plane like this. And I found that it's much easier to try a two-point landing, as difficult as those are in a tail dragger. Otherwise, if you put any back pressure on that stick to try to hit the brakes, then you'll just take off again. So we'll see if we can do it. And as you can see down there, I've only got 1.1 hours on this plane, so I don't have a lot of experience. But it's a lot of fun, and it feels a lot like that tailwind that we flew over Sedona. Very much like it, the Whitman tailwind. It is an acrobatic plane, it's pretty nimble, so it's cool. And of course looks great, as you can see. And if we could see in the back, you'd see I got Chet parked back there. Okay, so I'm going to come up to this windsock here, and then we'll just turn around. And I think I've got the wind set at like 2 or 3 knots. Nothing crazy. But if you don't mind the late shadows, or the late in the year shadows that you get, it is a pretty cool looking flight with the live weather, because it does look like it would probably just those low clouds, not quite foggy, but a little bit hazy looking. It's neat looking, but would not do well for what we do here on this channel. Go ahead and get our landing lights on. I really want to reach for my flap lever, but that's unnecessary. And you know, I don't think our little transponder light flashes on this. I just noticed that. It hasn't flashed since we turned that on. It is on, right? Yep. Okay. Alright, let me just get zoomed out a little bit on little NavMap here so I can see where we're going. Center that thing up. Very good. And I think everything else is in fantastic order. So with that, let's get going. Watch how fast this thing will accelerate. And man, it handles like a dream on this rollout for takeoff. Once that tail comes up, look how smooth that is. No yanking all around. All right, we're already at 80 knots. Look at that. And up we go. Don't need much runway. Alright, so let's get the autopilot on. And we'll come up at 1,000 feet a minute, which will not take us very long to get to 1,000 feet. So we'll bring that manifold pressure back to around 24, and also bring our RPMs back to around 2,400. That should be just about right to keep us from overspeeding, but we'll keep an eye on that. So this is not the best landscape in the world, but it's believable for way up here. And you know how it is at those high latitudes. It's rare to get good satellite imagery, and I just really can't think of that many other spots in the world that have terrain like this. So it definitely looks good enough. And there's that 9,000 foot runway, so that's the one you could bring your 747 in if you want to, or 777. And one of, if not the main reason that they get so many tourists up here is that Churchill is often referred to as the polar bear capital of the world. I did not know that. I'd never even heard of Churchill, so it was really cool to learn all about this place. And if you're wanting to spot one roaming in the wild, it sounds like this is the place to do it, as they migrate to the shorelines of the Hudson Bay each fall. And other than laying eyes on the great big runway they've got down here, we're circling back to take a look at a building just north of the gravel runway known locally as the Polar Bear Jail. And I'm hoping we'll be able to see it because it's got a huge mural painted on the side of it. I was hand flying last time and I really buzzed down close to it, but again, it's right by the runway, so if we can't see it, we'll take the drone out and look at it. But there's a polar bear, very detailed polar bear on the side of it. It looks really, really cool. But they built that thing back in 1982 to hold the naughty bears until they can be safely released back into the wild. And apparently any bear will qualify as naughty if he gets too close to the town. And they'll throw him in the clink, which apparently happens quite often, as they regularly get 1,000 or more curious bears roaming up here each year. But that thing is no luxury stay for those guys. The whole premise is that they don't enjoy their sentence at all. They'll keep them in there for up to 30 days, potentially even longer for repeat offenders, making the experience so unpleasant that the bears associate coming up there with starving because they don't feed them. Although I read that's no danger to the bears because they can regularly go much longer than 30 days without eating. But apparently that's long enough so that they don't want to do it again. And once they've served their time, they get tagged, tranquilized, and flown by helicopter to a location back in the wilderness. And I read the facility currently has 28 cells, with some designed for entire families of bears if there's a situation requiring that. Okay, so let's see if we can spot this thing. it's going to be not that building. I think it's this one right here. We'll see if we can see the mural. And on the other side of that, we've got something even cooler, if you can believe that. In November of 1979, a Curtiss C-46 took off heading north from the big runway with a belly full of soda and snowmobiles. And once they got up, they lost their #1 engine, tried to circle back around, but didn't make it back to the runway. They had to ditch right around here, and they modeled the thing as part of the add-on. But it's kind of small. So again, we'll fly over there and look at that if we need to. We'll see if we can see it. So here's the polar bear jail. And everyone survived the crash. They wound up walking back to the airport, but I think they were all seriously injured. Didn't describe the injuries in detail, but seriously sounds pretty serious. Yeah, we might be too far away to see the polar bear on the side of that, but look how close it is to the runway. We'll just hop out there and look at it. Yep, we're too far away. That's where they keep them. They said they don't allow any visitors there. 1 day a year, they said, if there's no bears in there. Well, you can kind of see the bear. See, there's his back there. But they said if there's no bears in there, they'll let people just go and look at the inside of it, I guess. And the plane is right there. If you got a big screen, you'll be able to see it. There's the fuselage, there's the tail sticking up, and it's got some wings coming out the side. Yeah, you can see it pretty well, as long as you're not watching on your phone. So the shorelines are a little bit blurry, but we do have some areas where there's some rocky outcroppings, like up here, that's modeled pretty well. Which, again, is good enough in my book for an area this far north. So I'll tell you about the earliest history of this area in just a minute, but I need to fast forward a bit to brief you on our next landmark. And let's climb up to 1,500 feet before we do that. And we'll go up at 500 feet a minute. As soon as Henry Hudson, the namesake of Hudson Bay, sailed up here in 1610, the English quickly recognized this would be a primo spot to set up shop for the fur trading business. But they knew those fur-loving Frenchmen would love nothing more than to scoop it up right out from underneath them. So in 1717, the Hudson Bay Company built a timber stronghold called the Prince of Wales Fort up here on Eskimo Point, which is right in front of us. The one on the other side of the river, that's the Churchill River right there. But knowing that nobody's afraid of a wooden fort, they built the massive structure we're about to see just 15 years later. And not only was the new fort huge, but so were its guns, all 42 of them, some weighing nearly 6,000 pounds. And then they built another little battery called Cape Mary on this side of the river. And then they built another one behind that one just in case someone took the little battery over here and started shelling the big fort, so they could use the other battery to shell the other battery. Now look at this coastline here, look at that. Looks really good. And there's Churchill. They got a population of around 900 down there. The permanent residents. I don't know how many they get when the tourists start to come in. Obviously default, but not too bad. But it turns out building that fort was all for naught in the end. In the year 1782, the dreaded French finally arrived with 3 warships, but someone forgot to tell the English they would need someone to man their fort. They did have 39 guys hanging around in there, but apparently they had no military experience, didn't know how to use the cannons or do anything else, so they figured they'd take their chances with the polar bears and abandon the fort without firing a shot. So once the French got it, they slighted the place so it couldn't be rearmed, and what's left is what we're going to see here in just a second. There's the other little fort right there. That's the battery. And I think that's a memorial of some kind. I didn't think that'd be modeled, so I didn't... There was a bookmark for that, but I don't know what it is, because I figured that would no way that'd be modeled, but there it is. We got one little map seam here, unfortunately. So on this fort, on the palisade way on the other side, you're going to see it looks a little discolored, and that's true to life. There's grass growing out there on the top of that. And then this thing in the middle of it was the governor's house. So I'm thinking, based on what I was reading about it, that this was the only thing out here. There wasn't like a town of Churchill, and then they built a fort. I think this is where everybody was staying. And then once the French recaptured the 39 guys that took off from there, I think they did a prisoner swap with the English, and everyone made it back safe and sound. And not much happened up here after the fort was destroyed, although they did set up a more viable outpost a little further south down the river. And here this place sat up until they made it a shipping port in 1929, linked by rail to Winnipeg, which is over 500 miles to the south. I think it's around 570 miles if you go straight there. And the idea was that it might actually be quicker to send stuff by train up here and then ship it across the Hudson Bay instead of hauling it down to the Great Lakes from Winnipeg and then sailing it through the St. Lawrence River. But it sounds like that idea never really took off either. So not a lot of action up here until World War II, when they turned this frosty wasteland into the U.S. Air Station, along with another cool site I'll tell you about once we get out there. So 900 residents, that's not a lot. I'm really curious about how many they get for tourists. Another reason people come up here, so I was reading, is that the Aurora Borealis are quite visible from up here. We'll also get back to that in just a minute. We're going to see a rectangular building right up here, which I think might have been modeled as one of the add-ons, and it did have a bookmark in the sim. And there's the port. I'm wondering if they still use that for anything. It just doesn't seem... I think grain was the main thing they were shipping out of there from Winnipeg. But that is just a really long haul to bring that up there by train. But Winnipeg's kind of far from any shoreline, so maybe it's still cheaper to come up here. I don't know. And it looks like they're maintaining it. But this little rectangular building we're going to see out of the left-hand side in just a bit is something that was built by the Royal Canadian Navy in 1950 to monitor Soviet radio communications during the Cold War. But they closed it down in 1968. It sounds like they had some other plans to turn it into a university research center or a hotel or something, but they never did, so there it just sits, rotting away where it stood. And I saw some pictures of that thing on the ground. It's really cool. It's one of those that was just kind of abandoned in place. They had pictures on the inside of it too. Pretty neat. Let's see, where's that going to be? It's going to be right up here once we turn towards the south again. And right there is a bunch of helipads, which I'm sure you could probably land on in the sim. And I'm wondering if that's where they keep all the helicopters that they haul the polar bears around with. Because I didn't see any other helipads around here, but you can't select those in the sim, unfortunately. And it does not appear to have been modded up as part of the add-on. So there's the building where they were monitoring the Soviets. And then just a little bit further south than that, we'll barely be able to make out the remains of a place called the CYYQ village. And it was a neighborhood built by the government in 1966 to house relocated indigenous people, which it sounds like did not go very well at all. They were formerly a nomadic culture that followed herds of caribou around out here, and it sounds like they did not adjust well to just staying in one spot. Within a few years, almost all of them were dead, and it was totally abandoned within 10 years. And if you look on the satellite map, you can still see some of the foundations. We'll check that out at the end as usual, the satellite map. But this was a little road that came out here, and you can see all the little foundations of the houses that were out here. I couldn't figure out why everybody died, though. Maybe just boredom. Look, that looks like a little foundation right there. But they stuck them all out there. I don't know how they kept them there either. Probably with guns. So a little bit about the geological history of this region, which, as you'll see, has a very distinctive appearance. We got a little teaser on that non-satellite image map. Look, some power lines going through there. See that? Oh, now they disappeared. Well, there were power lines there. They got lost in the trees. Where'd they go? Oh, there they are. You can barely see them coming through there. And there they are down there, too. If you look over at the northern northwest regions of Russia, that's the only other spot in the world where I've seen terrain that looks like this. And a long time ago, I had to break out my little animation of Pangea. These two areas used to almost be touching each other. And that was like 240 million years ago, so I don't know if it's looked like that for that long. But that's the only other spot I've ever seen that looks like this, where it's really flat with all of these lakes all over the place. But also, gleaned from my animation of Pangea, it looks like this region has always been at a relatively high latitude, which is not the case for most of the rest of the world. It's moved around quite a bit. This has always stayed relatively stationary. And I mention that because I thought it was also quite interesting that they said there's all kinds of dinosaur fossils out here. So when I was looking at a different animation of Pangea, there was one that showed the ice sheet movements, and it looks like up until about 20 million years ago, this whole area, the whole northern hemisphere, was relatively ice-free. And then we started all those cycles of ice ages, so that was a long time for critters to be roaming around and dying up here. But there's not like a lot of, usually you find the mountains where a big chunk of rock has come up and then fractured off and you can find that stuff. This looks like it's probably pretty marshy and swampy, so I don't know. Well, then again, along the coast they did have all those rocks, so maybe that's where they're finding them. So then I got to wondering about the formation of the Hudson Bay, because it is definitely an oddity, being one of, if not the largest inland seas in the world. Well, the general consensus is that it's just a low spot that filled up with glacial water, and eventually the Atlantic Ocean as the ice melted away. In fact, it's unusually shallow for such a massive body of water, and I'll just show you that again when we're done, how huge it is. I had never really taken a close look at it. It is massive. But the average depth of it is just 333 feet, which is quite a bit less than some of the Great Lakes. I think Superior goes down to about 450 feet. And if you zoom way out and look over to the eastern shoreline, you'll see it is almost a perfect semicircle that would be around 250 miles in diameter if it was complete. And as of right now, the most likely explanation is an ancient meteorite impact, though that has not been confirmed as far as I can tell. But if that turns out to be correct, it would be by far the largest crater that we're aware of. Way bigger than the one that wiped out the dinosaurs, bigger than the one down in South Africa, which is the largest confirmed crater that we're aware of. This would be about twice as big as that one. So that would have been something pretty serious whenever that was formed, if that's how it formed. But I can't imagine any natural way that that could be such a perfect semicircle. We'll check that out at the end. So as I was flying out here to see how our next awesome landmark looks before we turn back around, I was astonished to see a bunch of what appear to be houses built way out here along these lakes. And these roads going all the way out here, I was like, what are those all going to? And after scouring the web a bit, I discovered this is a site they built up in the 1940s where all the houses are, as summer retreats for the townsfolk back there in Churchill. But today they call it Camp Nanuq, N-A-N-U-Q. And they use it for the Boy and Girl Scouts, which must be an amazing trip, assuming you could sell enough cookies and candy bars to afford it. Let's hop outside the plane real quick. Is that cool or what? Unless you're flying over northern Russia, you just don't see anything that looks like that. That is really neat looking. So right up here is where all the little log cabins, well, they're not log cabins, but the little cabins and stuff are all along here, and then they got some more over here. And I think they said it's only for a couple weekends a year. There's some more down there. And this road running up along the north of it here is called Launch Road. And once I saw that, I figured, yeah, there's got to be rockets out here somewhere. And it turns out that's correct. There's a place up here called the Churchill Rocket Range that was completed in 1954, now abandoned. But they selected this way, way, way remote area, way, way, way up here because of the atypically high amount of aurora activity, as I mentioned earlier. So they wanted to send up some suborbital rockets to check all that stuff out. And they kept firing those babies off for about 25 years until they shut her down, completing over 3,500 launches before they were done. And there's two main facilities that I could detect. One of them would be right out here, which got modeled as a smokestack of some kind, and another one over here, which also looks like a smokestack, but in real life, there's a building, like a little hut-looking thing at the bottom of this, and I saw some pictures of them launching the rockets, and they would shoot them up out of the center of that tower, out of the center of the building. I mean, they weren't huge, they weren't like Mercury rockets or Saturn rockets, but that was pretty cool. I've never seen anything like that. So I guess they put them all together in the warmth of that building, and then they'd fire them up out of there, but you really can't see the structure at the base of them. That's a little pyramid-shaped thing down there. But it looked like it's enclosed. Pretty wild. And today they got a modern building out here somewhere that's part of the Churchill Northern Studies Center, which is an interdisciplinary research facility. And probably a toilet stop for the tourists coming out here to see the old rocket stuff and polar bears. That's where it is right now. That's the modern place, which doesn't look quite like that in real life, but we'll take a look at that on the satellite map. These next couple of spots are going to be modeled partially flat, unfortunately, but we'll be able to see some of the massive tundra rovers used by the Great White Bear Tour Company. They're an outfit that takes people out in the wildlife management area up here to spot bears and other wild stuff. Look at this. You can even see some texturing down there. That's amazing. For way up here, I do have the Bing map enhancement installed, by the way, so that might be helping a little bit, but I don't have a mesh pack or anything. That looks pretty cool. I'm going to include a link to the website for this tour place so you can see these tundra rovers. Imagine like a big white school bus with an extension out the back, like an open deck on the back, all mounted on top of huge tundra tires, and then link three of them together. It's like a big train of school buses on off-road tires. Crazy looking. So that would probably be some of them there, just not linked together. And then there's another one up here that appears to have some as well. And then right on this point up here, I flew on this side of it last time. I'm going to see if we can see it. There's a big rusty old shipwreck out there, and I don't think that got modeled because it's not close enough to the coastline. There's the other place where the tundra rovers. Yep, looks like none of them are linked together, but some do have elevation, which is nice. So the ship was originally launched in 1922 as the Frank A. Augsbury, and the 251-foot coal-burning steamship set sail from Churchill on September 10th of 1960 to deliver supplies to a nearby settlement, but 4 days into the trip, a storm rolled in, battering the ship with 80-knot winds. And like the guys flying that plane out there, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, that plane was called Miss Piggy. Not sure why they called it that. I think it did mention that somewhere in there, maybe just because it could haul so much crap. Nope, the ship's not modeled. But the captain couldn't make it back to Churchill, so he dropped anchor out here, which promptly snapped, and then rammed him up against the shore, broke his rudder off, shredded the hull of the ship. And now this thing's just sitting probably right about here as a big rusty wreck, and when the tide goes out, you can walk right out to it, which would probably be really cool to check out something like that. All 37 crew members were rescued by the Coast Guard, but the ship was a total loss. And Lloyd's of London, who had insured it, thought it was a bit suspicious, so they never collected on it. So truly a total loss. And then one more spot we've got up here is a place called the Mile 5 Dog Sanctuary. And I want to give a disclosure that what I'm about to tell you may contain some fake news. I think this place was a retirement home for sled dogs that was run by a guy named Brian Ladoon, who was a bit of a celebrity within the local community, but he died in 2018 after running the place since the 1970s. This is it right here. But some of the Google reviews said that when they came out here recently, I guess someone's still trying to run it, but they said the dogs are just like chained up there with no shelters or anything. And apparently every now and then a polar bear would come in and eat them. But I saw some pictures of polar bears interacting with them. One was even petting it, one of the dogs, which of course was just adorable. But you can go out there and check those dogs out if you want to as you're heading out to the trek tours for the polar bears. And there's our runway, we're coming in. So some quick announcements. We are less than a week away from the launch of 2024, and I'm just going to completely play that by ear. I don't know what's going to go on with that, how it's going to look. Assuming we can get in there and assuming it's going to be as good as this for our tours, I'll probably take the first couple of episodes to get myself familiar with how to get little NavMap integrated, all that stuff. Since I want all of you guys flying helicopters as often as you possibly can, autopilot off, I might do another little how to set up for helicopter flight, both with the assists on and without, so everyone can get up to speed with that. Alright, full RPMs, cut the throttle back. We don't have flaps on this, so I need to get down to about 80 knots. As always, this flight plan will be linked in the video description, along with our bookmark file and the freeware add-on for this trip, which again, you'll definitely want to put in for this one. Otherwise, there just won't be as much to see. Doesn't really have a performance hit that I could detect at all, which is great news. And we've got an upcoming... One of the guys on our channel flies helicopters in real life. One of our members and Discord members, which, by the way, you should check that out. I'll link our Discord page in the video description as well. And we're going to try to do a joint flight, him and I. He doesn't live here near me. We'll be streaming, but he's going to give me a real helicopter tutorial for, like, procedures and things like that, which I thought would just be awesome. So we'll try that, see if we can do a first of on this channel. That'll be really cool. And we've got a helicopter group flight in the works for the area around Naples, but with 2024 coming out so soon, we'll probably kind of put a hold on that, just see what happens with that. Whether or not we fly in 2024 or 2020, have to see how many of our crew that would normally go has 2024 already and installed. We'll just kind of see how that goes. And if you didn't catch our last trip, I had mentioned that I was just heading out of town. I'd actually tried recording this flight before I left, but I didn't like the way it came out, so this is the second attempt at recording this. I just took the best vacation of my life. My oldest daughter and I left here from Jacksonville, Florida, drove up to Helen, Georgia, from there up to Cherokee, Tennessee, then to Pigeon Forge, where Dollywood is, and then up to Boone, North Carolina. We were going to go to Asheville, but that place is washed out, so we went to Boone, then down to Charleston, where I was last night, and then back to Jacksonville this morning. Just an incredible trip. Of course, we were checking out nothing but caves and historical stuff and all that. Didn't go to any amusement parks. Okay, let me see if I can pull off this two-point landing. We're going pretty fast, so I'm just going to cut the throttle. I got to burn off this airspeed till we get down to about 80 knots, so we're going to be hopping all the way down the runway. Let's see if we can do it here. Burn it, burn it, burn it. Oh, a little bit of a hop. I just can't pull back on that stick or we're going to take off again, so we'll hop for a while. Alright. You cannot give it any back pressure. Look how slow we're going. It would come right back up. Come on, just burn it off. If I apply the brakes, the nose comes down, so I can't put any back pressure on it. So that's what I like about this plane. It was only 19 bucks, which I think is totally worth it. Really cool plane, definitely different to fly, difficult to land, more difficult than normal tail draggers, if you can imagine that. All a lot of fun. All right, I'm going to pull over. Let's see if we can get a little closer to the polar bear jail, because we're going to hop in the drone view, and then we'll check out little NavMap so I can show you some of the stuff that did not render real well here in the sim. I don't know how far we are down, so I'm just going to pull over right here. And we'll go check that thing out, because you got to see how detailed that mural is on the side of it. Okay, parking brake on. Pull open the window. I don't think the sounds change on this one. Let's be real quiet and see. Nope, sound didn't change. Okay, let's shut her down real quick. We'll just cut the mix off. And hop in a drone view. Whoa. Oh, well. Alright, which way? Where am I facing? Okay. Alright, so here's where the polar bear jail is. We gotta come up a little bit to spot it. Alright, where am I here? Get my bearings. There it is, right there. Oh, we drove past it. And then we'll go check out Miss Piggy. So check this out. Look at that. How sweet is that? It's kind of floating a little bit, but that's fine because who's normally doing this? But in 2024, you better believe we'll be hopping out and checking all this stuff. Look at that. That is really cool. And then Miss Piggy is over here just a little bit. So let's see. Let's get our bearings. So he came off of that runway coming to the north. And then there's some rocks up here. That's going to be it right over there, I think. Yep, there it is. You can see it. That little dot right there. Slowly. Slowly. Just bear with me, guys. We got to get out here and see it. When else are we going to come up here again? And I think this thing's all spray painted too, based on the ground pictures. And I bet they did it in the sim. Look at that. That's not perfect, but I mean, that's cool. Really cool. And they just left it there. I wonder why they left it there. Probably so they could spray paint it. Pretty neat, huh? Really, really cool. Okay, well, that's that. Let's look at little NavMap real quick. Centering off, trail off. So here's where the polar bear jail is. Yeah, you can see we're real close to it. And Miss Piggy, and by the way, the bookmark file for all these bookmarks, if you want to load them up and make it a little bit easier to spot stuff, if you're going to track this while you're flying around, I'll include the bookmark file as well in the video description. There's Miss Piggy. And even this map isn't real great because we're so far north. Came over here, there's the town of Churchill, there's the helipads. And it looks like they got one of them down there. I wonder if that's a pad. No way, that'd be too dangerous. You'd hit your tail on those bushes probably. And if we come up here, this is where the initial battery was that was to protect this side of the river, and somewhere back here they built another battery to shoot at this one if that one got captured. Huge waste of money. I don't know where the other one was, though, because the French came in and just took the thing. Let's see if we can see that little memorial. There is a shadow on that. I'm not sure if that's it or not. That looks like a big thing of some kind, maybe like a wreck. That can't be it. I wonder what that is. Unfortunately, the image is too blurry. So check this fort out. Here's the Prince of Wales fort. Look at that. So there's the governor's place, and then there's that area where the grass has just grown up on the sides of it, but that looks fantastic and looked really, really good in the sim. Very cool. Nice work with that. There's the port, and then here's the place where they were monitoring the Russian radio signals that is now just abandoned. It's called the Churchill Naval Building. I did notice a bunch of junk out there, which is too bad because you know I love junk. And then here's where they had all the indigenous folks living for 10 years until they died off. Man, I wish I knew what happened to those guys and why they died. So they came out here, and then here's where the Boys and Girl Scouts are hanging out, which must be a lot of fun too. They got some junk down there too. But what a trip that would be, huh? And then here's the rocket launch area. Let's see if we can get a better view of those launch stations. Okay, yeah, so you can see it here. See that building there? So they would shoot them out of that building. It would go right up the center of that thing sticking out of the top of it. And there was a really cool picture of that online if you care to look into that some. And then here's the other one over here, but the tower appears to have fallen down off of that one. And I think they even had some more pads out here, but there's just nothing left. If that's what those were, but that kind of looks like a former rocket launch area. And then here's the current Northern Study Center, which you can tell is a lot newer. And there's the old one. And then up here we've got our places where the tours are. They got a couple of the... are those the... Yeah, that looks like them. Maybe not, but this is definitely the place here where they got them. Yeah, those things were too big. So this is what they look like. There's the back of it, like the bus. And then the back of it's open up so you can sit out there, and then they just string a couple of them together, kind of like that. And they drive through there and check out polar bears. And here's the Ithaca. Look at that. That would be a lot of fun to explore. Better make sure you have your tetanus shots, though. That's cool. I like the fact they just left these things out here. Miss Piggy, that thing. And then here's the dog sanctuary. And I'm guessing, which you can see all these little circles in the sim. That's probably just areas where they chain the dog in the middle of it, and he just runs around until there's no grass left. But you can see there are no shelters out there, so that sounds like that was accurate. But, I mean, they're huskies, you would think, so they're probably pretty durable, living out here in the cold. So they do have quite a few rocks out here. Along the shoreline, you could see them better, but I guess this is where you'd probably find fossils if you're looking for them, because there are a few spots where they're sticking out, but not really inland. It's all down there by the water. Look at all this stuff. All right, so let me show you real quick. Look how big Hudson Bay is. Check this out. This is the edge of that thing they think might be a meteorite impact. And if that was a natural formation, well, more natural than a meteorite impact, that would really be something, because it's almost perfectly semicircular. And it would be huge. So the next biggest one, I don't know if we'll be able to see it or not. It's not the one down here by the Yucatan that wiped out the dinosaurs. It's down here. I think it's called the Vetterfort Formation. We talked about it in one of our flights, and you really can't see that here. It's kind of in this vicinity like this, but that one up there on the Hudson is twice as big as that. Pretty big. So that's it, guys. Check it out. Very remote, very, very cool. Look at the... There's no other airports out here. Look at that. The next nearest one would probably be... Well, they got a few south of that, but that's a pretty good haul. Let's see how close the next nearest one would be. 130 miles. And I wonder what it would look like up here. Oh, let me show you Russia real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. See all these lakes and stuff up here? So really just up here in northern Canada and this region here, which was the part that was connected. There's another huge impact crater, by the way. I did fly over that. The satellite imagery is just not great. It's huge. It's gigantic and looks kind of cool. Nothing else to see but that. You got to get really high to take the whole thing in because it's so big, but the rest of the satellite imagery was not great. Mountains look terrible. But up here in northern Russia is the only other spot that really looks like that with those lakes. See that? And really not even so much over here. A little bit, but not like this area. So Pangaea, this whole part kind of just wrapped around and connected over here. But again, it's all been pretty northerly for most of the history of the Earth. All this other stuff was moving around all over the place. So that's it, guys. Check out Churchill. Really, really cool. Learned a lot of amazing things. As always, had a great time, and I cannot wait to see y'all in the skies. Join our Discord server. I'm going to keep you guys posted on that as far as what my plans are for when 2024 comes out this weekend. So I'll update you guys on what my intentions are as far as upcoming flights, whether we're going to stick with 2020 or not, but I'll let you know later.